Hey, I am starting the stream and the recording now. Um, yeah, uh, I am going to be reading the first part of the book. Let me just borrow the book, actually. Going to be reading the first part of the book. Um, yeah, girlhood, that's the first part. Can't remember. There was a little bit that I wanted to say before I started this stream, but I can't remember exactly what it was. Um, hmm, hmm. No, I can't remember. Um, Obviously there are things in motion, lots of things I want to do for the channel and things I want to do outside the channel. But for now, I'm just reading an old book that I used to enjoy. Oh yeah, there was something. Um, I was going on YouTube and I was going on YouTube and searching for Queen Victoria. I searched the title of the book, The Life and Times of Victoria, and I saw a bunch of lots of clickbaity stuff, lots of kind of here and there, this or that. I didn't really enjoy it, to be honest. I kind of prefer um, being taken care of, so to speak, by the author, Dorothy Marshall. I rather have her guide me through the history and not have YouTube videos guide me through Victoria, who I remember fondly from reading the book. Maybe I'll take a look at the Wikipedia page for her for myself to get more information. But outside of reading this book, I think that's really all I want. It's just to read this book. Okay, so it starts then, and I think I'll read the stuff on the side. I'll take a break whenever I'm reading a page to read the stuff on the side, and if there's anything I want to say, I'll say something. It starts so. The life of Queen Victoria has a triple interest. It combines the study of a forceful character with that of Victorian womanhood and of great and successful monarch. In some ways, Victoria is the forerunner of the modern career woman. That's what we read in the last live stream. Dovetailing the role of devoted wife and mother with that of chief consulate to a large international concern, which grew steadily in its resources and magnitude throughout the years of her stewardship. Moreover, this dual role had to be lived in the fierce light of national publicity. Victoria had to be at once a wife, a mother, and a queen. This is the dilemma that provides the vital thread through the labyrinth of her life. Fortunately, helping her to sustain both roles, Victoria was buoyed up with a steady, was buoyed up. Obviously, I'm saying that word with my own inflection, uh, but the proper way to say it is buoyed. Uh, but Victoria was buoyed up with a yeah, with a steady belief in her own judgment to discern right from wrong. She was a singularly honest person, and is reported to have once declared that expediency was a word which had no meaning for her. As a result, she saw people and problems in black and white. Indecision was never allowed to blunt the edge of her determination. Hmm. Obviously, a very, Dorothy Marshall is very good at using this kind of colorful language, and obviously, she's done the research to back it up. So we'll see exactly what she means in terms of the edge of her determination or problems in black and white in the future. Obviously, things like that will come up. So Dorothy is using her words very carefully here to describe things, and we'll figure out what exactly she's talking about later on. Victoria was born into a world of change and conflict. Britain was still feeling the result of her long struggle with first revolutionary and then Napoleon France. In the North and Midlands, the tentacles of the new industrialism were extending every year. As new cotton mills were built and new blast furnaces poured out mass-produced iron, the population appeared to be increasing at an uncontrollable rate, augmenting the misery of unemployment which the post-war depression had caused the workers in these new industries. Hmm. Hmm. I might have to get up to get some water later. Um, Under new pressures, even the traditional structure of society itself was crumbling. Men no longer thought in terms of order and degree based on birth, but on class, which its underlying economic connotations as a measure of a person's place in society. So I think Dorothy here is talking about the power of the monarchy waning over over the citizens of England as the Industrial Revolution went on. So we might see that later in the book. Maybe Victoria's influence, maybe Victoria sort of loses influence in her lifetime, and maybe she has to deal with that. But I don't know. I'm just saying. Um, Even the moral values of which that society was based were changing as the new forces were challenging and driving underground the accepted standards of the past. On the one hand, there was the licentious tradition of regency. Regency? Both the future William IV and Victoria's own father lived openly with their mistresses, the actress Mrs. Jordan and Madame St. Laurent, respectively. On the other hand, there was the new seriousness of the evangelical movement, compounded of a genuine religious feeling and a conviction that if society were to survive the distress and discontent of a war and post-war years, the ruling classes must set an example to the lower orders. George IV remained an unrepentant rogue to the end of his days, but circumstances combined to push both the Duke of Clarence and the Duke of Kent into the ranks of domestic respectability. I'll just Google some of the words that are coming up. Obviously, if I had someone in the call with me, they might help me Google these, but I'll just take the time to Google them myself. It's weird that row was italicized. Row, Google says, a debauched man, especially an elderly one.
Roué.
Oh, roué. It's French. And the other word I'm having trouble finding what that word was. Licentious. Promiscuous and unprincipled in sexual manners. Dorothy seems to be very good at obscuring these kinds of things with colorful language. I like it. Okay. Something of the same conflict is to be seen in Victoria herself, though the term Victorian has come to stand for a strict and even prudish morality. The young Victoria craved for pleasure and for gaiety. Obviously, gaiety, like gay, using the old term, sort of happy, sort of joyous, that kind of thing, gaiety. She was fortunate in her mentors and in her marriage. Otherwise, with her affectionate, emotional nature, she may well never have come to stand for it all. That was most respectable in 19th century womanhood! Exclamation point. Hmm. So it seemed like she had lots of guidance to sort of temper the sort of um, more, um, I don't know what to say, bubbly side of her, I guess. That's the kind of language I would use in 2023. Um, but yeah, obviously this book is quite old. I think the date is 1972 when this book was published. Let me check. First edition 1998. First published 1972, yeah. So there's a bit of difference in the vocabulary. Hold on a second. There's a bit of noise in the background, um, but that's to be expected. Um, some of my family is coming home, so it's a bit lively right now. Um, Queen Victoria was born on 27th of May, 1819, at Kingston Palace. Hmm. I might search up where Kingston. Let me make a note of that, just to maybe at the end of the live stream I'll check where Kingston Palace is geographically. Okay. Her 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 Cogberg? Her Coburg. Her Coburg. That's interesting. Her Coburg grandmother called her the Mayflower but the reason for her birth had been political, not romantic. So there's lots of things I need to look up then. On November 6th, 1817, the only daughter of the Prince Regent, Charlotte, the wife of Leopold of Saxe-Coburg, died in childbirth. It was unlikely that the regent would have other legitimate children. His repugnance to his wife, Caroline, was such that cohabitation had ceased many years earlier. Indeed. And this is a picture of Kingston Palace where Victoria is born. Overleaf left. Previous pages. And this picture right here is obviously in the thumbnail. He captured the embarrassing moment when 80-year-old Lord Rollo fell backward down the steps while making the act of homage to the Queen. Right, John Martin painting. It's a little too dark to see the whole thing. But it does look nice. Obviously, I'm not able to read the dialogue. I'm not really allowed to zoom in, though I can try. Yeah, I could read the dialogue. I'm not that good at reading script, actually. Obviously, I did learn a bit of script in kindergarten and things like that, but I never paid attention. Well, it's probably nothing. Continuing in the book, he came. Oh, right. Let me see what the last page said. It's talking about the Prince Regent Charlotte, talking about Queen Victoria's birth. And his wife, Caroline. Indeed, after he came to the throne as George IV, he tried, unsuccessfully, to divorce her. Divorce obviously being very difficult in the past. Not sure the situation, but it's my understanding that it was tied to the church somehow, and that's made divorce difficult. Yet, unless Caroline died, so enabling the regent to marry again, there was no hope that he might have a legitimate heir to succeed him. Only two of his brothers, the Dukes of York and Cumberland, were married, and they had no legitimate heirs. So there followed a flurry of diplomatic activity to provide the rest with brides. William, Duke of Clarence, married Adelaide of Saxe-Coburg, Menigan? Menigant? Obviously, these names are quite interesting. Pronunciation is a bit foreign, though it is English. Um, Mignant? No. Mainin. Maininkin. Meninkin. Nope. Well, Adelaide of Saxe Meningen, Adolphus, Duke of Cambridge, married Augusta of Hesse-Kassel, while the bereaved Prince Leopold of Saxe-Coburg had the satisfaction of seeing his sister. Um,
Hello?
One moment. Well, hi, Treelander. You seem to be in a car or something.
No car.
Oh, is it like air conditioning or?
Yeah, it's just a fan. There we go.
Ah, okay. Hi, Treelander.
What is up?
Welcome to the stream. I'm streaming on YouTube right now.
Oh, wonderful.
Hmm.
What are we streaming today?
Here I'll give you. You can look on Discord. Here, hold on a second. That's what I'm doing.
I see.
Um, yep, that's basically what I'm doing. Um, yeah, I was reading, talking about, um, sort of the condition of, you know, the book I'm reading, right?
I actually don't.
It's
Maybe
it,
about.
the book is called The Life and Times of Victoria, by Dorothy Marshall. This is what the cover looks like. It's a book that I read a few years ago, actually, but only part of the way through, and I want to be able to complete it and sort of get the picture that I was missing out on that I was really interested in.
Ah,
Mm-hmm.
well, this should be a good read.
Yeah, I'll just make my way through the book. I didn't get that far actually. They're still on the condition of Victoria's birth, and
Alright.
uh, yeah, they're sort of like the bit of drama, you know, that was going on while she was being born. You know,
Like I said, no, right?
yeah. Well, just succession and things like that. I think that's like an English thing, right? To be interested in the succession of the royal family.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Very English.
yeah. So I guess I'll get back to the book. You're welcome to stay and just listen to me read and explain, or if you have any questions or things like that.
Yeah, I'll give it a listen.
Okay. Um, let's see. Right, I was just talking about while the bereaved Prince of Leopold had the satisfaction of seeing his sister. So there's a bit of siscon going on actually, Treelander.
Oh, great.
Yes, right. Things like that were
Uh,
very common back in the day, especially in England,
I
especially for the
believe
royal
it.
family. Um, yeah, you'll see lots
They
of
got those
videos on
moles
YouTube.
on their noses.
What'd you say?
Those moles on their noses. Comes from inbreeding.
Yeah, yeah, things like that. Uh, you can sort of, yeah, well, you already know.
Yeah.
Um, I think that
I
kind of
don't, but
talk
okay.
is, well, that kind of talk has kind of been, you know, um, done. You can
Oh,
find lots of videos on YouTube about things like that, about him or her being married to cousins or sisters, especially for the royal family, especially in history. Um,
it's quite strange.
yeah, well, There's a reason for it. I'm not sure if Dorothy Marshall, the author, will ever get to it. I think it's just something that she kind of takes in stride. She's really talking about Victoria, not the conditions of the royal palace. You see what I mean?
No. Yeah, I do.
Um, yeah. There's obviously there's the captions on the side, but I'll read them if I'm ever interested. I'll just skim through them otherwise.
No, read them.
What are they?
Oh no, I said okay.
Oh, okay. All right then. Um, the widowed princess, Lignant. I'm not too familiar with these English names. Do you know how to pronounce them?
Not really.
Lig, li, Leinengent, Leinengen, Leningen.
Litigant.
Hmm.
Estigant.
Okay.
Screwshot Basic. Strong.
The widowed princess of Leiningen married
Lincoln. Uh,
the Duke of Kent. As Victoria was later to observe
Kent.
of her uncle, he is ever ready and ever most able to assist his family, quote unquote. Obviously, Dorothy Marshall, I sort of went over this before when I was looking up some words in Google. The author is very good at sort of obscuring sort of like this sort of taboo sort of sexual nature of the people that she's going over in history with sort of colorful language. So obviously when Dorothy says he's ever ready and ever most able to assist his family, obviously you take that with a grain of salt, right? There's something to that.
Yeah. Yeah,
Um,
some of that.
yeah, that's just the sort of thing. That's just how Dorothy talks in this book. And she talks with very, sophisticated language. Sophisticated for 1972, which is when the book was published. 2 years later,
Yeah.
a mere 8 months after his daughter's birth, the Duke of Kent died, leaving a minute income of less a minute income of less than £300. Obviously, that would be dated to the time. £300 then is not £300 now. From a
Yeah.
jointure to his widowed duchess. Without the help of her brother Leopold, who was still living in England at Claremont, the Duchess would have fared badly. Nobody as yet saw a future. Nobody as yet saw a future queen in her infant daughter, Alexandrina Victoria. That's the main character, so to speak, of this book. She's just introduced.
Mm.
Because it
Alright.
was expected that the Duke of Clarence, now heir to the throne after the accession, forgive me 1 second. Okay. Just checking if everything's fine with the stream and all that. The Duke of Clarence, now heir to the throne, after the ascension of the regnant in 1820, in 1820 would have children. This was a reasonable assumption, as he already had a large brood of illegitimate children, and his legal wife was young. Obviously, you see
Oh,
well, when people have free time on their hands, and it's back in the day in England, people
yeah.
do things that occupy their
Pretty
time.
bad.
So, yeah, lots of baby
A lot of
mamas and baby
teens.
daddies going on. Are you familiar with that kind of thing, Treelander?
Not really.
Not really? Okay.
No.
I'm just asking. You don't have to like live those experiences
Wait a
to
minute.
know about it. You can kind of
No,
hear
no, no.
about it.
Hold on. No, I'm
Mm.
might be a bit under the weather. I didn't understand your question.
Do you know about the baby daddies and the baby's mamas that are going on in this book that are
Oh, I
being
do.
described?
I think I do.
Okay, good, good. That means you're not lost. You're still paying attention.
Yeah.
Okay. However, none of his legitimate children survived infancy. His last daughter dying in
Huh.
1821. Therefore, until 1825, when Parliament, in recognition of the fact that Victoria must now be regarded as William IV's probable successor, voted the Duchess an annuity of £6,000 for the maintenance and education of her daughter. Both mother and child were dependent on the allowance that Leopold made to them. Hmm. This was well able to afford, as on his marriage to Princess Charlotte, Parliament had voted him an annuity of £50,000. Hmm. So some money had to be exchanged while they were handling the succession of the crown. The widow and her daughter lived very simply in rooms assigned to them in Kingston Palace. That was where Victoria was born, Kingston Palace, with a routine varied by visits in the summer to Ramsgate, or to Claremont. Their contacts with the court were few. There had been no love lost between the Regnant and the Duke of Kent, and it was not until 1826 that Victoria and her mother were invited to stay at Cumberland Lodge when the king was at Royal Lodge, Windsor. Doughty had paint rattled as George IV, was enough of his old charm remained to make an impression on his little niece, to whom he gave his portrait set in diamonds, which Lady Cunningham pinned on her shoulder. Um, Obviously, we'll get to later in the book how that sort of detail, right? Dorothy's obviously speaking with a lot of purpose, the author. So we'll get to see exactly what impression was made on her exactly. And we'll see that later on.
Right.
From Victoria's point of view, in spite of having to kiss her uncle, the visit was an enjoyable one, particularly when she was driven round Virginia Water in the Royal Phaeton, Phaeton, and taken abroad a barge from which the party fished, while on a neighboring one, and a band played. The visit was repeated in the following year, but alas, it rained dreadfully, quote unquote. Um, those are obviously, I'm guessing those would be Victoria's words that she used to describe the situation. Um, Obviously, um, the author's resources, right? They would be primary resources, so they would be things, letters, journals, things like that, written by Victoria. So that's sort of the account that we have from Dorothy, the author. And I think
Interesting.
that's what she's working with. Lots of letters and journals and things like that, records like that.
Huh. I see.
Um, of William the Fourth's Victoria's memories were less happy. Largely by then, she was old enough to be conscious of the strain that existed between him and her mother. Hmm. Victoria, I'm getting the idea that William the Fourth is Victoria's father. Um,
Hmm.
obviously, when you're reading a text this dense with names and things like that, you have to take note of what's going on. It's not easy to interpret at the first
Yeah.
glance. I'm gonna stand up to get some water. Actually, hold on a second.
All right.
Okay. Um, I just got up and got myself a. Oh, I got disconnected. Okay, I'm back.
Hey,
I
what's up?
I just got myself a cup of water.
Based.
Uh, sorry, I had to. Are you? Never mind. There's the stream if you want to look at it. Okay.
Yeah, I can see it.
William himself, that would be William the Fourth, though eccentric, was a friendly person, anxious to show his favor toward his niece. No, William the Fourth isn't Victoria's father. That would be the reigning king at the time. That would be the one that she succeeded, and that would be his uncle.
Hmm.
Victoria later wrote of him, "He was always kind to me, and he meant it well, I know. I am grateful for it, and shall always remember him as his kindness, as his stream did a little disconnect. Everything's fine. My internet's still working. The stream didn't split in half, so it's fine. I'm guessing it might be a little difficult to stream on Discord and at the same time stream on YouTube. Do you think? Drealander, you there?
Yeah, I'm here. I don't think I hear you though.
Ah, okay. Um, I was asking if it would be difficult to stream on Discord and on YouTube at the same time.
That might be.
Okay. So I guess I'll just have you make do with listening to me read the book instead.
All right.
Um, right. I was getting to Victoria's description of her uncle, William the Fourth. Um, I'm grateful for it, and shall always remember his kindness with gratitude. He was odd, very odd, and singular, but his intentions were often ill interpreted. Moreover, his wife, this is getting back to the author, these are the author's words. Moreover, his wife, Queen Adelaide, who was rather surprisingly deeply attached to her elderly and bulbous-eyed husband, was a singularly sweet person. So obviously, again, this is Dorothy speaking, bulbous-eyed, so she's using her language to obfuscate the cold hard truth of the matter. Treelander.
Yeah. Pretty messed up.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
I got myself a cup of water.
All right.
Let's see. Was a singularly sweet person. In the years before her husband's ascension, she had made a happy home at Bushy for his children by Mrs. Jordan without either comment or complaint. This was indeed part of the trouble, for the Duchess of Kent was perhaps over-conscious of her position as the mother of a future queen, and as such was determined to protect her daughter from every contaminating influence. Hmm. Hmm. Okay. So the Duchess of Kent is Victoria's mother.
I knew that.
Okay. She found it deeply shocking that a man should openly acknowledge his bastards, though in fact the court under William and Adelaide was utmost bourgeois. Bourgeois in
Like,
its
as in some
respective.
societies, it was acceptable to do such things.
What do you mean? Acknowledge his bastards? That's what you're talking about?
Yeah.
Bastards, obviously referring to his illegitimate children. I think that's what bastards means.
But of course.
I'm just gonna Google what bourgeois is. Bourgeois? Character bourgeoisie. Oh,
Luxurious.
Bourgeois.
bourgeois.
Bourgeoisie.
Um,
Bourgeois.
Characteristic of the middle class, typically a reference to maternalistic values and or conventional attitudes. That's what Google says. Okay.
That's pretty cool.
Mm-hmm. In its respectability. Nevertheless, the Duchess kept her daughter away from it as much as she could, even trumping up an excuse to prevent Victoria from attending her uncle's coronation. Behind this display of prudery, there were deeper, half unconscious motives for the Duchess's actions. Okay? For the Duchess's action.
I think it's very.
Yeah?
Because very complex, deeply.
The complex.
Motives.
Yeah, and it's interesting that Dorothy.
Yeah, like so, you know.
Yeah, it's interesting that Dorothy was able to piece this together based on her research. That must have been very difficult for her to do.
Yeah.
During the early years of her widowhood, she had resented the neglect with which she had been treated and the lack of support that she had received from the royal family. So there it is. Moreover,
Oh,
this resentment had been fanned by a man who had strong and unfortunate influence over her, Sir John Conroy, the comptroller of her household. Um, Not exactly sure what a comptroller is, though I guess I could make an inference based on the text. So I guess it's like a landlord or something. I'm not sure. Um, he had been her husband's equerry, and the Duke had made him one of the executors of his will. Of Anglo-Irish descent, Conroy had certain brash charm, though most of his contemporaries found him essentially vulgar and his manner with women too familiar. However, both Victoria's mother and her aunt, the Princess Sophia, who also had apartments in Kingston Palace, relied on him implicitly. This was unfortunate. Conroy was a man of considerable ambition, who hoped to use his influence over the Duchess to carve out for himself a successful career as the power behind the throne. So I think that's referring to her daughter, the Duchess's, the influence over the Duchess. So that's referring to Victoria. If William IV should die before Victoria reached
yeah.
her maturity, it was therefore his policy that
Goodness.
Victoria and her mother should be isolated from everyone who could hinder these plans. There is little doubt that Conroy used his influence to intensify the strain between the Duchess and the court. So obviously there's lots of moving parts when you're dealing with royal family. So lots of things to
Yeah.
consider when you're looking at the past, when you're taking things, when you're reading history.
Yeah.
Um, his plan seems to have been hmm, his plan seems to have been to follow the age-long Hanoverian precedent of building up a rival court round the heir to the throne. One method was to institute a kind of royal progress to show Victoria, and even more her mother, as a possible regent to the people of England. Hmm.
Mm.
Okay. Accordingly, from 1832, when Victoria was 13, we're skipping time here, I guess, a series of
Mm.
visits to the great houses of such peers as were not firmly attached to the court was arranged. There were benefits to Victoria's education in such tours. If her mother's attitude denied to her daughter the familiarity with court life and the duties that would subsequently be hers, she did at least gain some knowledge of the country over which she was to rule. I like this little drawing.
Mm, that is quite a
Uh,
drawing.
yeah, you're looking at it.
Yeah,
There's a
yeah.
self, there's a self-portrait. Victoria's drawing of herself
Very
after she
nice.
contracted typhoid at Ramsgate. What's typhoid? Do you know off the top of your head?
That would be salmonella,
Ah, okay. So like food poisoning.
a bacterial disease.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Gained some knowledge over the country she was to rule. Nevertheless, except in a purely geographical sense, it was a limited knowledge. Victoria became acquainted with the life of the great country houses and with the pattern of aristocratic living. But she saw little of that, of the mass of the people, except what could be observed along the roads over which their coach traveled, or at the inns at which occasionally they were forced to stop for the night. Hmm.
Mm,
Hmm. That's usually usually when you read texts when you read texts this old, um, can be very easy to get lost in what's being said, but basically it's easy to interpret if you see the writing as a manner of speaking, and it can be interesting to piece things together like
yeah.
that. You've read this is not
Very,
as
very
old
interesting.
as this is not as old as what I'm about to ask you, but have you read Shakespeare?
I read some of it back in high school.
Yeah, the language obviously is a bit antiquated, but if you think about it, it's essentially writing that's like thinking or speaking. So
Yeah, that's true.
lots of joint words, lots of phrases, lots of clauses, things like that. Um, that is
Yeah.
not indicative of modern English, but it's still English nonetheless, and it's still
Mm,
interesting to read. It's just it takes a little bit of time to understand.
yeah.
The Jam actually was quite interested in literature in the same way, and he did sometimes speak of Shakespeare.
Well, I wasn't really much into novelistic kind of stuff, you know.
You weren't, or you were?
No, I wasn't.
Uh, did you and him speak often?
We did sometimes, but not really often.
Hmm. Okay. You two seem close from my perspective, but I guess that was just me.
Uh,
You and the Jam. I mean,
yeah.
you were
And
close, or you weren't?
I don't know, like we were alright, you know.
Hmm. Okay.
Do you know why he left?
Um, I don't know the details. I don't think he gave anyone any details. But he did his own thing, I guess.
It's kind of weird.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
No, well,
yeah, getting back to the book.
Mars.
It was. It was on her first tour that she caught a glimpse of the new industrial nation, which by the end of her life was to overtake the England of the coaching era to which her early journeys belonged. Hmm. So you can see here like a very quick changing perspective. And that's something I can actually relate to, obviously, because when I was growing up, I didn't have cell phones or things like that. It was always about going outside, going to the library, going to the park, things like that. That's where I found enjoyment. Um, and as time went on, I found it very difficult to adapt to sort of internet life of social media and things like that. Um,
Yeah, it's kind of weird living in this new age of technology.
yeah, it was. It was weird.
Yeah,
Um, but without the new age of technology, we wouldn't have a whole scan print of an entire history book from 1972.
if we never had technology, we wouldn't have the current society we live in today.
That is true. That is a true statement, Treelander.
No computers, whole.
Yeah.
Is it?
After changing horses at Birmingham, the young traveler commented in her journal on an extraordinary building flaming with fire, and that the country continues black, engines flaming. The country continues black, engines flaming, coals in abundance everywhere, smoking and burning coal heaps intermingled with wretched huts and carts and little ragged children. Hmm. Obviously, that's child labor, Treelander.
Why are the children ragged?
Because they're working in the coal mines, in the coal furnaces.
Couldn't they keep up their manners or something?
What are you talking about?
Oh, these fools are going to work. They're going dirty. That's why they get low pay, man.
Come on, Treelander. Okay, continuing with the book. These semi-royal progresses aroused William IV to fury. Because the Duchess contrived that wherever they went, they were received by the local dignitaries with addresses and demonstrations of loyalty. When the party launched, when the party lunched at Shrewsbury on their way to Welshpool, the mayor presented the young princess with a silver-topped oaken box filled with Shrewsbury cakes. Hmm. When they arrived at Welshpool, they were escorted into the town, which was decorated with arches, branches, flowers, flags, ribbons, etc., by a troop of yeomanry. Finally, okay, by a troop of yeomanry. I don't know what yeomanry is. I misread that period as a
Me neither.
comma. I'm just gonna look that up. A freeholder, it says.
Hmm.
A yeoman.
Strange.
A noun originally referring to either one who owns and cultivates land or to the middle ranks of servants in an English royal or noble household. I'm getting the feeling that this is not a beginner's book, Treelander. Getting the feeling this
Yeah,
is not a it's
it's a
not a
little.
beginner text. Yeah.
Man.
Uh,
This ain't
You
no War
probably
and Peace.
it's in a War and Peace. That's what you said.
And it ain't no War and Peace, buddy.
It ain't no War and Peace.
It's the real deal.
War and Peace by Leo Tolstoy.
Yeah,
Have you read War and Peace?
almost.
Hmm. Almost, but are you currently going through it?
Maybe.
Okay. Um, that's interesting. I didn't know it was a book title. I used it kind of haphazardly as a tag on one of my anime memes on a Russian website. I didn't know if it was a Russian
Oh, nice.
book.
Really?
Yeah. Um.
I never knew that.
Yeah. Um. I guess I'll send you the link, Truelander. But this is just for you. I'm
Okay.
gonna DM it. I'm gonna DM it to you. I should.
Thank you.
Okay. I'll get back to the book in a second. I gave that the War and Peace tag.
Nice.
It was from Gosick, an anime called Gosick. Yeah, that was one of my little video memes. Okay,
Cool.
yeah, it was a lot of fun. I like that website. Um,
Uh,
let's see. Um, right. Okay. They're describing one of their trips when they arrived at Welsh Pole. There was lots of decorations and yeomanry. Finally, as they entered the park, they were greeted by a salute of guns. To the king, any salute of guns, with its aura of a royal progress, was the last straw, as he angrily ordered that it should be discontinued. The final breach between him and the Duchess seemed to have been caused by her having extended and improved her suite at Kingston without having first obtained the royal consent.
oh,
Though this may have been the result of a misunderstanding. Hmm. The occasion for a public explosion was a banquet given by William IV on his birthday. Hmm. Imagine on all days having drama on your birthday, Treelander.
yikes. That would suck.
Okay. At which he attacked the Duchess personally by declaring that his one fear was that he might die before his niece came of age, and that in consequence the regency might fall into the hands of a person sitting near me, who is surrounded by evil advisers and who is incompetent to act with propriety in the position in which she would be placed. Hmm.
Oh,
Not surprisingly, the Duchess was frozen into speechless indignation, and poor Victoria burst into tears, which, in moments of emotion, she was always prone to do. Hmm. So we learned something about
oh,
Victoria from there. So she is
She's prone to emotion.
yes, she is prone to emotion, and that was sort of described earlier. Um, I don't remember if you were here or not. I don't think you were. It says
No.
here she was fortunate in her mentors and in her marriage. Otherwise, with her affectionate, emotional nature, she might well never have come to stand for it all. That was most respectable in 19th century womanhood. So she had lots of things going on, and her mentors and her marriage helped control the sort of things going on under the surface.
Wow.
Yeah.
What good people.
Um, Good people, you said?
Yeah.
Okay.
They
Um,
helped with their mental state.
they did.
Yep.
Nevertheless, it is probate. Don't know what probate means, so I'll just Google that real quick.
I think it means something with dialogue.
Ah, the official proving of a will. Um, it is
Oh,
probate. It Latin to test or to prove something proved. So I think Dorothy here is using the Latin derivative,
okay.
not the modern definition. It is probate that in her heart, Victoria agreed with her uncle, at least in thinking that her mother was surrounded by evil advisers who intended to use the regency, if it occurred, for their own advancement. Hmm.
Wow.
Hmm. Okay. Um, by now, I think you understand what that sentence was, right, Trelander? I'm just trying to
I
guess
think so.
because.
That was.
Okay.
I thought it was a really messed up sentence.
Yeah. Basically describing how Victoria sort of had this understanding that um, the position of regnancy, basically the crown, um, was sort of sought after by people who were seeking to advance their career. And Victoria had this understanding that that was what was going on, that something like that could happen, is possible, and might happen to her. Um,
Oh,
Obviously, in the paragraph before, you saw how Victoria began crying when her mother was challenged, um, talking about the regency. I'm not sure. I'm not even sure if I'm saying that word right. Regency. Um,
yeah.
um,
The fragrancy.
um, but right. Obviously, the position is very. It's a very tumultuous position. Lots of things going on, and Victoria understood that.
Yeah.
I think that's what the use of the word probate. Um, oh wait, no. The word is probable, not probate.
Oh. Oh.
I misread
Oh.
that.
Oops.
Nevertheless, it is probable that in her heart. Okay, so I guess now you have a better view of what that sentence was.
Yeah. Oh. I think we gotta head
Um,
off for a bit.
okay, Trelander. Thanks for coming to the stream and for coming to the VC.
No problem, Alan. I'll see you around.
Okay, bye, Trelander. Okay. Well, that was Treelander. Um, trying to think of um times when Treelander was on the after show. Can't remember anything specifically, but he did appear. He was there. And he was on the Allen show. If he wasn't on the Allen show, he wouldn't be in the server. Just can't remember any sort of key details. But that was Treelander. Yeah, nevertheless, it is probable that in her heart Victoria agreed with her uncle. Hmm. So saying in her heart, so there's lots of things that Victoria kept to herself. I think that's what Dorothy is trying to say. By now, she had received ample proof of this, and her detestation of Sir John Conroy was deep and lasting. In October 1835, she had contracted typhoid at Ramsgate. Um, Typhoid fever is a bacterial infection that gets spread throughout the body, affecting many organs. Hmm. Obviously, things like this would be very serious in eight in 19th century England. Um, but I'm sure they had remedies and things like that. They had ways of dealing with this sort of thing, especially for royalty. Um, and for the rest of the month had been desperately ill. While she was still weak and convalescent, Sir John, abetted by the Duchess, had tried to wring a signed promise from Victoria that when she became queen, she would appoint him to the key position of her private secretary. Somehow, as she told Lord Melbourne later, she found the strength and determination to refuse. Um, Obviously, I'm trying to pay very close attention to the language that Dorothy is using. I think this is the third time that she used the word determination. So she's using that word to characterize Victoria. Victoria's a very determined person. The forlorn mystery that she endured then was inexperienced. The forlorn misery that she endured then was an experience that, for years, she could neither forgive nor forget. It embittered her relations with her mother and left her with no liking for her mother's lady in waiting. Lady Floria, Lady Flora Hastings, a fact with a fact which was later to have disastrous consequences for them both. This coldness is apparent. Docking Railway. I'll just skim over this. I might take a look later. In her journal, this coldness is apparent in her journal. Oh, my loan is expired. My loan in the book. My book. My 1 hour loan thing that I have to do with the Internet Archive is expired. Um, I guess I'll see if I can borrow again, but I might stop here. I wasn't able to get through the first chapter. This is very dense reading. I used to, when I had this book, I used to read it on the train actually. My train rides to um, school, things like that. It was like a 40-minute train ride, and large portion of that time was spent sitting on the trains before I transferred to another train. Okay. I guess I'll stop here on page 24 after I finish reading it. In her journal. It's apparent in her journal. This coldness is apparent in her journal, it says. Which her mother had given to Victoria on her 13th birthday so that she could keep a record of their coming visit to Wales. It was fortunate for future historians like Dorsey that the habit begun then of writing up the events of the day persisted throughout her life, thus providing invaluable clues to her immediate reactions to events as they happened, until she became queen. This journal must be used with a realization of its limitations. It was not a secret diary. Her mother and her governess saw it regularly, and young Victoria learned to practice the wisdom of keeping her thoughts to herself. I guess that's the key detail that I was hinting at before when I read that when I read that in her heart Victoria understood, agreed with her uncle. It's that Victoria had to learn to keep things to herself because even her journal wasn't private, right? And I think that's what the author is telling us. Um, the wisdom of keeping her thoughts to herself when these were critical of the people around her. She confined herself to a meticulous account of her daily doings, of such subjects as were on their journeys. They changed horses. Descriptions of the places where they stayed, the names of the people they met, and later the books that she read, or the concerts she attended. Her personal opinions were confined to such subjects, and from them the historians can discover who were her favorite singers, actors, and authors. There is no mention of the jealousies and pressures which later made her describe her childhood as a sad one. Even her final tussle with Conroy, with all the resentment and bitterness that it caused, was never recorded. In her early journals, it is the omissions that give the best clues to Victoria's private feelings. She was affectionate in an age where emotion and sensibility were appropriate for a well brought up girl to express. She was also a very honest child who could never bring herself to express sentiments which she did not feel or to praise what she disliked. This trait remained with her all her life, causing her considerable perplexity when, in the role as queen, she knew that she ought to express sentiments which as a woman she could not feel. Though her life, throughout her life, Victoria never learned to disassemble, to dis, to dissemble, never learned to dissemble. I'll look that up. I should look the words up as I read them to make sure that my understanding of the sentences are correct. Dissemble. To conceal one's true motives, feelings, or beliefs. Therefore, just because she lavished dear, there's the whole dear thing that I was talking about in the first live stream, and dearest on the people on whom she was fond, and they were many. It is surely significant that often as Lady Floria's name appeared in her journal, it is never dear Lady Flora. Her, her steadiest affection, even devotion, was bestowed on her constant companion, Louis Layton. Louis Layton. Originally, she had come to England as governess to Victoria's half-sister Theodora, but had been the princess's governess from 1824. I should check the live stream. Okay. Just making sure that I'm not getting any live chat, so I wouldn't want to miss that. But no chat so far, which is good. Good, I haven't missed anything. Let's see. Originally, she had come to, let's see, her dearest, I'm gonna just reread the paragraph. Her steadiest affection, even devotion, was bestowed on her constant companion, Louise Layton. Originally, she had come to England as governess to Victoria's half-sister, Theodora. But had been the princess's governess from 1824. She was the daughter of a German pastor, and to increase her social standing, George IV created her a Hanoverian baroness in 1827, so 3 years later. When by 1830, it was clear that Victoria would succeed her uncle, her mother decided that a governess of more exalted rank was desirable, and the baroness was replaced as governess by the Duchess of Northumberland. Northumberland? This change did nothing to break the link between Layton and her young charge, as the Baroness then became Victoria's lady-in-waiting. This link between a teenage girl and an older woman who is not only her constant companion, but also is devoted to her, is, while it lasts, one of the closest ones that an adolescent can form. I think Dorothy is speaking from her own experience. Obviously, humans are limited creatures. We only know the perspective of one person for our life, which is our own. So Dorothy has to interpret the things that Victoria may be feeling, and this interpretation is tied to this sort of student-mentor relationship that Victoria had with Louise Layton, who is her governess. So I guess we'll get into that in the further reading, the sort of mentors and influences that Victoria had growing up. But that's the end of the reading for this live stream. I've exceeded over an hour and 20 minutes, which is good. And the stream only cut off a little bit. And there is no sort of split live stream. It's just one continuous 1 hour live stream, which is good. But yeah. I guess this is fine, right? Obviously, when I was reading the book firsthand, I didn't go through it chapter by chapter at a time. I went through it page by page at a time. And I guess I'll keep that in mind as I make my way through this book. This book is obviously quite large. There's 222 pages. So I shouldn't rush myself while I'm making through it. I should take my time and try to piece things together as I go. Um, but thank you to anyone who made it this far. Um, um, yeah, I had fun making the thumbnail and things like that. It was lots of fun. And thanks to Treelander for coming on to the live stream. But I'll end it here and I'll continue the reading of this book when I can. Yeah. Okay. Thanks for coming to the live stream. That's it.